The principal source for A Few Small Nips is the satiric graphics of José Guadalupe Posada, whose skeleton prints and sensational horror scenes both Frida and Diego relished. Frida painted this scene because she felt a sympathy with the murdered woman, because she herself had come close to being, as she put it, murdered by life. Two years later, Frida gave testimony to the lingering impact of Diego's affair with Cristina in a painting called Memory. Frida appears with cropped hair and in European clothes. During Rivera's affair, she had cut her hair and stopped wearing Tijuana costumes as a kind of retaliation. She is flanked by her alternate identities, schoolgirl clothes and Tijuana costume, both empty but equipped with one arm. Frida is armless, suggesting her feeling of helplessness. In her chest is a gaping hole pierced by a rod. The heart, huge because it feels so much, lies on the ground at her feet, a fountain pumping rivers of blood into blue water. Frida was by no means always the helpless victim of Rivera's infidelities. She engaged in affairs of her own. One of Frida's lovers was the great Russian revolutionary Leon Trotsky. Rivera had arranged for Trotsky and his wife to be given asylum in Mexico. The Trotskys lived in Frida's house for 2 years. Frida employed all her considerable seductive skills to attract Trotsky, and it was not long before Trotsky began writing letters and slipping them into books that he was lending to Frida. Soon the flirtation had become a full-fledged affair. But though Frida was fond of Trotsky and flattered to be loved by him, in the end she grew bored by his pedantic personality. Months after the affair was over, Frida gave her ex-lover a present. She presents herself to the great revolutionary as a colonial-style bourgeoise. In her hands, a sheet of paper reads, "For Leon Trotsky, with all love, I dedicate this painting on the 7th of November, 1937. It was both Trotsky's birthday and the anniversary of the Russian Revolution. André Breton, pope of the Surrealist movement, was also charmed by Frida and her work. He wrote of Frida, "She is a young woman endowed with all the gifts of seduction, one accustomed to the society of men of genius. There is no art more exclusively feminine, in the sense that in order to be as seductive as possible, it is only too willing to play alternately at being absolutely pure and absolutely pernicious. The art of Frida Kahlo is a ribbon around a bomb." The admiration of men like Breton led to invitations to have exhibitions in both New York and Paris, where she met with a great deal of success and recognition from artists such as Picasso, Miro, and Tanguy. Frida's response to being welcomed into the Surrealist pantheon was a show of innocent dismay. "I never knew I was a Surrealist," she said, "until André Breton came to Mexico and told me I was." After 1938, Frida's paintings became more complex, more penetrating, more disturbingly intense. Works like What the Water Gave Me show that her encounter with surrealism led to a deeper expression of enigma and psychological innuendo. This painting depicts a bathtub daydream in which images of apprehension and recollection, sexuality, pain, and death float in free association on the bathwater above the bather's submerged legs. They thought I was a surrealist. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. Frida's journal, kept during the last decade of her life, is a moving and poetic outpouring of images and words. Color bursts wildly out of outlines. Lines hurtle and meander as if she were drawing in a trance. Figures are fragmented and distorted, faces are often grotesque masks. The starting point for many images was a drop of ink. Or sometimes Frida began a drawing by putting a spot of color on a page, and then, while the page was still wet, she closed the diary so that the spot changed shape and was doubled. Using these images as points of departure, she elaborated on them. Frida wrote, "Who would say that spots live and help one live? Ink, blood, smell. I do not know what ink I would use that would want to leave its track in such form. I respect its wishes and will do what I can to flee from myself. Worlds, inked worlds, land free and mine. Faraway suns that call me because I form a part of their nucleus. Foolishness. What would I do without the absurd and the fleeting?" Frida also explores her memories in her diary. She recalls her childhood, telling the story of her imaginary friend. In 1939, Diego and Frida were divorced. For solace, Frida turned to painting. On the day the divorce papers came through, Frida had nearly finished what is her best-known painting, The Two Fridas. The two Fridas sit side by side, their hands joined in a stiff clasp. The Frida on the right, the loved Frida, wears Mexican clothes. Her skin is dark, her heart is whole. In her hands, she holds a miniature portrait of Diego from which blood flows. The unloved Frida on the left wears a white Victorian dress. Her lace bodice is torn, exposing a broken heart. Near her sex, she holds a pair of surgical pincers, which cut off the flow of blood from Diego's portrait. In a 1940 self-portrait, Frida amplifies her personal misery by giving it Christian significance. She presents herself as a martyr with a necklace of thorns. The dead hummingbird pendant suggests Frida's own deadened spirit. The bird also has another meaning. Hummingbirds are used as magic charms to bring luck in love. In 1940, she painted Self-Portrait with Cropped Hair, in which she sits in a Mexican chair in the midst of a large expanse of reddish-brown earth that is covered with strands of her hair. She is dressed in a man's suit that is so large it must be Diego's. She sits with her legs apart like a man. A lock of hair hangs between her legs like a murdered animal. She holds a scissors near her sex. At the top of the painting are the words of a song. "Look, if I loved you, it was for your hair. Now that you are bald, I don't love you anymore." However, despite difficulties, there was an abiding love between Diego and Frida. At Diego's request, Frida went to San Francisco to join him. On December 8, 1940, Frida and he were married for the second time. They returned to Mexico and began life together again. Their reconciliation settled into a comfortable, reasonably happy pattern. Frida painted in the mornings and spent much of the rest of her time finding ways to make life convenient and pleasant for Diego. Frida wrote, "The remarriage functions well. A small quantity of quarrels, better mutual understanding, and on my part less investigations of a tedious kind with respect to other women. Thus you can understand that at last I have learned that life is this way. and the rest is just an illusion. Self-portrait with braid can be seen as a comment on her remarriage. The hair strewn all over the ground in the earlier portrait has been gathered, braided, and shaped into a pretzel on top of Frida's head. A reaffirmation of the femininity that she had denied. In Self-Portrait as a Tijuana, 1943, Frida's love and longing for Diego made her deck herself in the headdress of the women of Tehuantepec with its